of Pakistan and Pakistan movement, and to date they play in furthering the state narratives and state's agenda. And that is something I thought that Aisha is better placed than any of us to speak about, because I should also, one thing that her introduction has not mentioned, Aisha comes from a Sufi family herself. Her father they got her practice in Europe, and then I don't have to work. You see the kind of money that the Delegates generate. Yeah. Yeah. So I've been had to quit. I'm very happy to quit all my jobs and be and do that. But I failed so far to convince her. So Dr. Aisha, what we will do is that we will give you the floor. Let's say for about 10 to 15 minutes. You can talk about this issue of Islam and state in Pakistan, how the Sufi Islam figures in that, how the Ghaz have played a role in history and currently, and what is the critique of these, power broker Sufi descendants. And then we'll open it up and invite questions and comments so that there's more interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Raza. Thank you so much, Dr. Mehdi, and Farah. We extremely grateful. The audience is here. Uh, it's not just that I was born in a Sufi silsila, it's also because my mother was a novelist, Jamila Hashmi. Two of her novels, the last one was a Mansoor Large, and the one before was a Quratul and Tahira, the poetess, but also a Sufi in her own right. And as she was writing those novels, I sat and experienced that knowledge. And I'm not sure how much I learned, but whatever I could gather, uh, it was very the process of her novel writing was very educating for me. Um, the Reza, let me start sharing the story of the third book, which I set out to write. After military with military hunting me. So somebody said, "Why don't you go to a will bring you some relief at what should I write about? Why do you write about Sufism? Why do you write about Silsila?" And I started looking at South Punjab, Bahawalpur, where I come from. And I remember, this is good 10 years ago, when I started my research, and I suddenly realized that it's like, wow, a place with so many Sufi dargahs, you had a lot of extremists and militants. And my own mind just couldn't comprehend what had happened. And then I started off from Punjab, and then I went on to Sindh, and I traveled around. And Sindh again is, a hub of Sufi shrines, and if you talk to Sindhi friends, intellectuals, they will say very proudly, we have a Sufi culture. We are the Sufi society. And every time you talk to a Sindhi intellectual, it's like almost at the risk of your head getting bashed, because they don't recognize how rapidly things have changed in Sindh and in South Punjab. Uh, and I traveled back and forth. I went to the dargahs, I went to other areas to see what was happening. So let me start with, I think, one mistake that we tend to make. I think the problem is our understanding. Our problem, I think, is from the word go, is that our conceptualization in modern times of Sufism is as political as, other orders. our inspiration is, we tend to see Sufism in terms of something which brought people together, which as a carrier of peace. Uh, Funny enough, when was it? I think it was around 2008 or 9. There was this Rand Corporation study which was trying to figure out Muslim institutions around the world which could be used as alternatives, and Sufism and Sufi shrines were kind of recognized as one, the source of peace. So there's a problem of modernity here in conceptualizing Sufism. That here in the Indian subcontinent, where you had a majority was non-Muslim, you had these Sufis that traveled from different parts of the world, settled there, and brought peace and brought, reached out to people from different religions. Of course, all of that is true, but let's not also take away our attention from the fact that a lot of these, the four major Sufi orders, there's Chishtiya, Sohrawardiya, Qadriya, Naqshbandiya. And I come from, yet another silsila, which is a Vesi silsila. One can discuss it during Q&A. Now, there are differences in all these orders. For example, the Naqshbandi has a very stricter formulation. I mean, if you have to compare anything with Ahle Hadith, there is very little difference between the Naqshbandiya order and the Ahle Hadith order. On the face of it, very different kinds of Islam. Yeah. Again, Sohrawardiya. I mean, the one of the issue with Sohrawardiya has always been that the difference between Chishti and Sohrawardiya, for example, is that while Chishti was kind of more kind of all embracing, Sohrawardi and it believed in free will. The idea of free will, Sohrawardiya encouraged, or even maybe lack of, it's not the right word. Encouraging is not the right word, but Sohrawardi espoused relationship with power and riches and the rich. And therefore, if you look at, for example, Bahauddin Zikriya, who was head of the Sohrawardiya Silsila in Indian subcontinent, he reached out to, for example, the rulers in Afghanistan, wanted them to come and fight the Mughals. And the Mughals then, of course, got hold of Bahauddin Zikriya, and he had to kind of maybe apologize or whatever. So there is an element of politics right there. Now the thing is that of course they had to be all embracing. Let's not forget, this was a land where Islam or Muslim rulers had come from outside. And because of them, were some these people to come. And majority of religion, other religions, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhism, of course, came much later. So you could not have embraced or engaged with the people you stricter formula. In a much more stricter form than maybe other orders. But there was definitely engagement, and therefore, and part of, and anyway, part of the principle of Sufism, of course, is embracing. Because, I mean, if you allow me to kind of go back to, to when Islam came around, of course, the issue that, that kind of still continued to bother the Prophet and the friends around him, uh, was that how do you imagine the Creator? And how do you imagine this relationship with the Creator? And of course, there are these set practices for an average Muslim, 5 time prayer, Hajj, Zakat, other things. But, it's like you have to, there was this experimentation, this constant experimentation of engaging. How do you reach closer to the Creator? So that experimentation is there in Sufism, and that experimentation is what leads to embracing everybody around. And instead of shunning people and saying, no, you're not this and you're not that, there is that level of tolerance. But come to modernity, I think we have a problem when we engage with Sufism and see it simply as an instrument. I mean, our problem with our modern times is that we look at, we, it's the I mean, my issue is with instrument. Bring peace. I think what Sufis were saying, I mean, what concept of one principle shared of, you know, PNC that the peers wanted that, and they supported Jinnah. And these were feudal peers, by the way, who wanted that. Uh, so, and that is how it has been. I mean, it has continued. Um, I was laughing with somebody, me and Raza, we were in Chicago, so evening we're sitting down, we're talking, and you know how these peers have been used by the state. I mean, one particular character, for example, and this is not, not a commentary on his current politics at all, but it's part of the tradition. For example, Mahmoud Qureshi's Makhdoom Sajjad Qureshi, one of the major shrines of Multan. When Ziaul Haq was the dictator, he was the governor of Punjab, and one Urs of Data Sahab in Lahore. And Ziaul Haq came, and it's interesting that, I mean, he's the governor of Punjab. Also, he's the Sajjada Nashin of the Dargah. But he this is the thing, it's not longer about the rutba of his belief system. It's about, it's pure power play.
Really compromised the belief system too. Peace of Makkah. He actually gave Ayub Khan blessings in public as the dictator, and essentially saying that this is spiritually sanctioned also.
Yeah. So let me quickly finish, make my last point. And so, this is something which has been happening. The other thing I think which is important to understand, once the peer and the dargah becomes instrumental in state power, what happened post 1980s? Now, 1980s, there was this major societal, political, there's a shift at all levels. Soviet invasion of Afghanistan with Soviet Union. You have a free flow of militancy, extremism, jihadis, all kinds from the Middle East, from wherever in the world, and you have them there. Now, there is, of course, the bad aspect of it. But I think what we cannot ignore is another factor, that these different political influences created a different level of expectation amongst the society. So if I am a believer and I have to go through, reach the peer and be connected to the dargah through layers and through a hierarchy, on the one hand.
So
There's space here.
Paris.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah. So on the one hand, there is the hierarchy, but on the other, you have a mullah-led explanation and this thing that, look, if you become a martyr, if you do this, that, or the other, you get 70 huris, the Hululan, a crown of jewels, and you'd be able to get, 20 people of your loved ones forgiven. But just imagine the sense of equality. It's almost kind of conceptually revolutionary that in an otherwise unequal society, how it would attract. And that is exactly what has happened and kind of displace Sufism in our parts of the world. I mean, it has pushed it back, it's damaged it. And I'm not even going to argue that it has reduced numbers of people who go to the shrines. And the numbers are reduced not because people are thinking seriously about this, about the Sufi concept. I tell you my own experience of our own dargah, etc. Is that now I see the murid has become more intelligent and searching in a different way. Now he asks you, you know, uh, it basically tries to kind of bribe you by saying, "Get a taviz bhi de de." Uh, but is actually searching for if you're going to put in your influence and power to get
Something
his
done.
children, job or get something done. So that and then go, because what else there is? So I think one last thing, Raza, and I'll stop here. I think it's important that we kind of keep things in those different boxes. Conceptually, Sufism, reaching out, the Sufi ideas, in different religions, and uh, so in Islam as well, so in Pakistan as well. But the politicization and instrumentalization and institutionalizing of Sufism is something which is a different kettle of fish. And we need to separate the two. I'll stop it.
Thank you so much. Many points you've raised, and I'm sure that there'll be questions and comments from the audience. And I have a few as well, but I think let's open it up in the interest of time. Yeah.
Explain a little more on institutionalization. What do you precisely mean by it?
Dekhe, institutionalizing is when Sufism becomes an institution, the dargah. The dargah, and now what was the principle? Even if you look at the whole principle behind caliphate, uh, the Prophet could have selected uh, his own first cousin, but the principle that was followed was whoever is more capable. Of course, there is a debate within Islam as well between Sunni and Shia, how there was a legal politics in it. But the fact is, he didn't push. And what even Sufism, any sect would argue, is that the more capable, it's not uh, who's the more powerful, but who's more capable in terms of being well versed in the religious principles, the Sharia, and whatever is to be achieved through a particular order. Now, what happened in terms of institution when I mean institutionalizing is that sons and their sons and their son, the bloodline became a principle, and the families became very central, and they became governors of that order. So even where before you came in, we were talking informally. Did you say sorry? Shabazz? No, Shabazz Kalanda. किसकी बात हो रही?
Ali Shahbaz ka
Yeah. So I mean, they didn't have kids, and yet the closest families, the bloodline that was followed. Now, following the bloodline, it's like creating an empire, right? You become these shrines and become mini empires. It's not your capacity in terms of faith, but in capacity in terms of your family. Uh, you go to. I've been to, for example, Jaipur, Ajmer, right? In Ajmer, it's and you get that sense there that you have these different family members. If you want to reach this corner of the dargah or something, it's important if you know somebody. Uh, so this is what institutionalizing means.
Yes.
You mentioned that one of the reasons that people are going away from the institution is the politicization, these power structures that are unjust, obviously.
Sir, I didn't say they were going away.
Uh,
They are going away, and yet they're not going away.
they still remain in that circuit. But my sense is, having traveled through all this landscape of dargahs and Sufis and the landed gentry peers and the not so landed gentry peers, my sense is that the majority of people, at least in Pakistan, not as much in India, have are trying to, they've gone away from the spiritual aspect also. For some reason, at least in our upper and middle, and I would venture to say lower middle classes too, there's the sense that this brand or this color of religion, there's something wrong with it, that it is, it's not that whole idea of this being unifying and just and all inclusive and bringing in peace and harmony, that seems to have been damaged. That's my sense. What do you?
No, you're right. See, but you still have lots of people. And I'll tell you something. I mean, let me be a bit of a cynic, but the thing is that be it any kind of center of religion, be it Mecca or be it Dargah, problem is you're going to have a lot of people visiting because these are also, they tend to be community centers as well. I mean, in a village, I mean, look, place yourself for a minute, not in New York, but a small village in Sindh or in Punjab. Uh, a woman, for example, if she wants to go to the market, if she says that, I want to go to the market, I'm going to buy clothes, I'm going to do shopping, she will not be heard easily. If she says, बच्चा है, jinn aa gaya hai, something like that, or there is some problem, physical problem, you have to go to the pir. That is taken care of, and it's it's a mix of a holiday, community getting together, you're there. So, and given the nature of poverty, a lot of other factors, the numbers will still be there. The issue is that those who get educated, and I would argue, and what I at least learned from my own experience of looking at these things, is that modernization, which brings education, then opens up people away from the shrines and from from the Sufi orders and takes them in another direction. Because if you can access text, then you don't need that hierarchy. Your search takes you elsewhere. And so that modernization, education as a form of modernization, is bound to bring more extremism. Because unfortunately, what Sufi orders have not done is a good religious educational system. I mean, once upon a time, dargahs used to have madrasas. They don't anymore. There are very few dargahs who actually have madrasas, who kind of can teach, educate. I mean, forget about educating others. I mean, you have Sufi families where the family members are not educated about their own order. So how they're going to, and that is, one of the major problems.
Thank you. Yes.
Since the basic concept of us all is Islam, why there is a university among the mullah and the Sufi? From the very beginning, if we just talk about Mansur Halaj, and there was like a conflict about his ideas, and he was just cut in piece. And then it was proven that he was like a cut and piece wrong, and Data Saab has proved that he is a Sufi. So why these people, keeping in mind that the basic concept is Islam, why they cannot come together and promote only one Islam? Why we are talking, I'm sorry to say, why we are talking only the Sufism is the solution or is a conflict, why they cannot come together?
So the two reasons, I mean, we have 72 sects, let's not forget, in Islam. And the reason behind that is very simple. I mean, when you have a power center, and as you kind of grow out of away from the main power center and control Muslims, people tended to define, you know, their own, introduce their own version, and that's how 72 sects also evolved. With time. So one is that, and the other thing is that this has happened in Christianity as well. This happens, I think, in any faith where people tend to kind of defy the power centers. You are bound to have different definitions. It's not a matter of one Islam or 10 Islams or 72 Islams. Some would remain the same. It's how different people define.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know how coherent I'll be because this is like to me it's a very abstract topic. So it's like different things we could talk about while addressing one particular thing. But in my eyes, in a perfect world, there would be almost a separation of church and state. Like you mentioned, bringing religion and like having good religious schools. Well, I thought maybe that's like almost an oxymoron because in my eyes, as an atheist, there is no such thing as maybe a good religious school because religion to me is subjective, right? It's nothing that's concrete.
please also introduce yourself. So,
Oh, my name is Sean. I was speaking earlier. I'm just a New Yorker, mixed
Okay.
van, a yellow cab driver for several years. So
So,
just overall
New Yorker and an atheist.
and,
I
a-
remember
and an
that.
extrovert that is, open to
Okay,
a
very
lot of
good.
different
Thank you for
views,
being here.
But to me, it seems like that it's Daisy people in a nutshell cannot agree on anything. And so to say like if they can agree on a religion is also the same thing. It's why can't we just aspire to almost look beyond like Sufis teach beyond the aspect of religion and just almost like an insania, like a humanitarian perspective. Like I know to me, like the whole concept of Pakistan is just doomed to fail because it's based on Islam, its religion and state. And in my eyes, it trickled down over into like this conception of creating a Khalistan or the Hindu Rashtra, right? So it accelerated this polarization. And I think instead of talking how can we fix that with more religion, I think we need to, for some reason, like stand up as liberals and progressives and talk beyond religion and say, how can we do this and it's hurting the environment. And that's another thing, Like I said, it's a ripple effect. And Pakistan, the Radcliffe Line follows the Indus River. It's all centered on water as well. Water is a human right, and if we cannot even have fresh air and water, how can we even begin to talk about religion?
Okay. I agree with you. And ideally, this is how it would be. But in 2024, uh, even in the United States or in Britain where I live, you also have, school. Let me finish. Schools run by seminaries. Now, firstly, the topic of my discussion was Sufism and Dargah. Right? And do not put yourself when you're listening to me in 2024. Ideally, this is what I would want to do, not have religious seminaries and have, uh, you know, this schools,
Secular schools.
secular schools, right? The point I'm trying to make here is that if conceptually we feel that Sufism has something different to offer, right? It's not extremist values, but values which encompass humanity and brings everyone together. Every order, in order to kind of build that, you have to have your madrasas. Madrasas is, what is a madrasa? Madrasa is a school, right? So these other sects, Ahl Hadith, Deoband, Bareilly, etc., they have their religious seminaries where they define, where they conceptualize, and that system of education is more modern than what any dargah has to offer. And therefore, that is the problem which I was highlighting. For example, issue of blasphemy, issue of treatment of women. The problem today is that if, uh, hundreds of years ago, the people, the Sufis that started these different silsilas would probably be defining these issues differently. Now, if you go to the Sajjada machines today, representing those orders and ask them for an answer on these two issues, for example, the answer you're going to get is precisely what you'd get from a mullah. So, and that is lack of education or developing education about your own order. This is all I was talking about. And let's not forget that, the problem that we have in South Asia. Pakistan, 1947, created a problem for itself, religious state. But let's not forget that India artificially experimented with secularism, but the base of the society and community had religion in it. 50, 60 years later, it's back to that, not just India. Look at Sri Lanka. We used to say Buddhism is very peaceful. Now it's not. So everywhere, for different reasons, religion has struck back and struck back hard. So while we can talk about, and we are liberals, but we're also a minority. We are a worse kind of a minority than any, I would say, any sect anywhere, right? So there needs to be a recognition somewhere of our limited capacity as well. So while we grow our capacity and educate, say, 250 million people in Pakistan, that no, we have to be secular, we have to be have liberal education. I don't see it happening in my lifetime, at least.
But you would like to.
I would, but
Yes.
it's not going to happen. So
I
how
think
do
this is negative. I think we should aspire
So,
to have the discussion.
Let's
How-
let's
how we
get
make
back to
that.
this point. We have another gentleman, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you.
Nasser,
Thank you.
after you, yeah. Yes, please. Introduce yourself, please. So,
Oh, my name is Salman. I'm from New York. So my question was, in the Sufi philosophy, there are two major branches of Sufism. One is called Sabadatul Shahuz, and the other is called Wahdatul Wujud. They are the main two principles or philosophies of Sufism. Do you see any distinction in them? And also specifically with regard to Wahdatul Wujud, when you say that Sufis subscribe to Sharia just like any mullah, and they would give you the answer, Sufism would give you the same answer as the mullah would say.
not
but-
Sufis, but those representing holders of
Those,
the shrine?
that is today's conditions,
Yeah.
you can say. Okay, that is understandable because historically speaking, strictly in terms of philosophical discourse within the Sufism, Wahdatul Wujud in particular is considered veiled atheism by no one less than Schopenhauer himself. He considered Wahdatul Wujud as just veiled atheism. So they are basically considered to be looking down upon the organized religion, which we call Sharia. So the Sufis do not, traditionally speaking, Sufi thought does not comport with the Sharia, which is the organized religion itself. Actually, it's anything but Sharia and sort of
Shariat versus Tariqat.
Sharia twist.
That's the whole debate. Yeah.
Right. And that is a resistance to Sharia. And the Sufi literature is full of these. Not today's, but 100 years ago and 200 years ago, Sufi literature from Bulle Shah to Sultan Bahu to uh, uh, Sindh wale kya naam hai, Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai. Everybody looks down upon Sharia, looks down upon the concept of following a strict order of rules. Uh, that's so. How do you reconcile it with the fact that, is it just the lack of the education of Sufism itself that has led to what we see today, that our Sufis, those who actually uh, claim to be following the Sufis like Khadim Rizvi, and they turn out to be very violent. The Brahmis and Khadim Rizvis of today, they are supposed to be the followers of Sufis. What led to that?
Asha, can we collect 3 questions because of
Let me-
in the
let me
interest of
just-
time?
Just be,
Take it.
I'll just give a
Okay.
one-line answer.
Okay.
Because he has explained Bhagavad Gita and Shahud himself. See, again, certain orders, Sohrawardi were more mindful of Sharia than Chishti or Qadri. Naqshbandi, again, stricter. I mean, Naqshbandi doesn't allow music, for instance. Chishti does, on the other hand. But leave that aside. See, very simply, I don't want to repeat whatever I spoke for 20 minutes. The problem is that if the orders do not educate themselves about themselves and don't learn what the order had said, you are not going to sound very different from the mullah. I mean, we forget. I mean, we ordinarily say, no, ये तो Barelvi hai, right? Completely forgetting that Barelvi movement is not a Sufi movement. It's a mullah movement, right? Barelvis have got nothing to do with Sufism. The only thing where Barelvis kind of connect with Sufism is because they kind of agree with, they kind of.
They're okay with
Yeah,
shrines,
okay with
shrine
shrines,
worship.
But by the way, so are Deobandis, right? The Deobandis are stricter about what you can do at a shrine. Barelvis are much more open. You can go pray, do whatever. The principle, the point I'm making is very simple. That in so many years, because of institutionalizing of Sufism in the form of the shrine, you have lost the knowledge of what the Sufis taught. It's more about power. And unless you educate yourself about your own faith, about what the question was in the beginning, you're not going to sound very different.
Thank you. So we had a few hands there. Nasser first, and then I'll come to you too.
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Nasser, and I run an organization that works for Ahmadi rights in Pakistan. I just wanted to get your thoughts about the Ahmadis, which not many people might know had a Sufi origin, in the sense the founder of the community was very influenced by the Sufis of his time. So I just wanted to pick your brains on that. Do you have any views on how the community, which has essentially become a bloodline-led community now, and we know it for its persecution, but if you have any thoughts about the community's role in today's Pakistan, other than the persecution that they face?
Yes. Okay, so I will park this one, Ahmadis, and then Raja Dahir.
Yeah. My name is Raja Dahir, and I'm living here in New York. We say Sindh is the land of Sufis and peaceful peoples, but in today's uh, every month, around 20 Hindu or non-Muslim girls are kidnapped and they are taken to the dargahs, and the age of those girls is even around 12 to 13 years, and then age of 12, 13, they are getting married with the Muslim men or young boys. And those that factory of converting from non-Muslim to Muslim role is of dargahs, Bharchundi and Sarandi Peers in a sense. What would you like to say about that? Even we know behind that state is involved, and surprisingly, they don't want to see Hindu people in a sin, but they are supporting more Sikh, uh, I don't know. I forget what to say about the Sikh, Sikh temple. Sikh temples. In a sense, new. Even we don't have that much Sikh community, but they are supporting them. What would you like to say?
Good question. And let's get another one here. The gentleman, yeah.
So I have, so it seems it's not really a question, it's an observation that the long arc of history in this instance is a hopeless one, is going away from liberal to illiberal. And my real question is, um, what is there any connection to the drug crisis? So the drugs. So is that because in the Indian Punjab, this is a real issue. Absolutely everything is now corrupted by, in fact, Amitabh Ghosh's book is that opium is the mother lode of all history. There is no history that has happened without opium. But is any of that influencing what is going on today?
Okay. So we have three questions. You wanted to say something? Hasan, baad mein aata hu, aapki tabiyat jo.
Thank you. My name is Tashmeen. I'm a fat New Yorker and I'm happy about it. What could be the role of the and the Sufi network? What could be the role of the in your opinion, which
And the
is
Sufi
inspiring towards, like the topic of today's discussion is the role of the and the Sufi network in Pakistan. So we have heard your beautiful talk now. I wanted to understand from you, how do you see practically what could be the role of the in today's
Ideal role, you mean? What could be
in
the
today's
Yeah.
world, not ideal. Ideal would be
Okay.
maybe in a few lifetimes from now. But
Okay.
Now,
So-
I think that is does Sufism or Sufi thought, or does that have an answer? Does that is there any hope that it will bring peace and harmony?
हम तो मानते हैं लेकिन अच्छा जी
no, question is what could be the role of the
got it. So we have four questions: Ahmadis, forced conversions, and then drug crises, and then the role of
Let me start with this. The answer is there is no rule. I'm sorry. I come from a Zen Dargah, and I'm very ashamed. I've learned a lot. It gives you, I'll tell you something. It can be a major instrument. You have access to ordinary people. They come and download their worries, their concerns, their anxieties to you, right? Searching for an amulet or asking for prayers. But that is such a platform for engagement. If a positive engagement has to be had, it's hard work. Honestly, it's hard work. I'll give you a very, very tiny story. If
Yeah. Go ahead.
So from my own village, because of the uselessness of the institution, from my own village, people who had, the emerging middle class, some of them, so below middle class, when I say middle class, it's not just the middle class as we see it, but the lower middle class. So there were many people who would send their children to, to fight jihad, join Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, in Bahawalpur, where I come from. That's where Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters. So when I was doing my research, I, decided to kind of come out of my comfort zone. And so this woman came who just lost a son somewhere in Kashmir. The Lashkar-e-Taiba was coming to a house to give a lecture, and that's the game they play. So I decided, and I wore a burqa because I didn't want to expose myself. And I went to her house and sat there. Of course, she knew her family sister sat, listened to what Lashkar-e-Taiba had to say. Fast forward, she said, for a meeting. Now, the thing is, they were also, although they had joined Ahle Hadith, they were still connected with, in a way, with my household. She couldn't let me go until I spoke to her family. I went to the inner room, and her sister came. And her sister said, please pray for my son. I want him to become a mujahid. I want him to lead that. looked at the woman and said, you know, if all you capable people become shaheed, how are we going to run the society? And then I left, you know, chatted and left. Many months later, I found out that she had actually not sent her son to become a jihadi. So, I mean, what I'm trying to tell you is that it can be a platform and it can have an effect. It's our lack of capacity. The people who are in charge of those shrines, their lack of capacity, which is not making these shrines functional. Sorry
Thank
for the
you.
long answer.
So Ahmadi,
Ahmadi, yeah.
Ahmadiyya movement. Toba, Toba.
Very complex.
Sorry.
Definitely, one doesn't want them shot and killed. I personally believe that. I mean, I don't have an issue calling them a sect. And the thing is that, you know, the Ahmadi faith itself comes from, is an extension of, I mean, comes out of some of the principles that are there in Islam. The whole debate about, you know, the whole philosophy of apocalypse, you know, the Mahdi,
Coming, yeah. The coming of the man.
yeah, the Mahdi and the Messiah, and so there is that. Now,
Sorry.
had we not been so kind of brutal towards Ahmadiyya, we could have also had, I mean, you know, all these, I mean, the problem right now, I think one of the major problems we have with Islam is that we do not have a conversation amongst ourselves. You know, we tend to, it's easier killing someone than having a conversation. That's what's happening. You know, otherwise there is a lot that we could have talked to, you know, about with the Ahmadis. I mean, for example, the whole idea of takfir. I mean, Ahmadiyya also believes in takfir, that if you don't believe that the Khalifa of Ahmadiyya is you know, is a Mahdi in a Masih, then you are not a Muslim, right? So
Correct.
that takfir, the concept of takfir, operates in a different way in other sects. So this negation and this whole madness of who can define himself a Muslim and who cannot, that needs a serious conversation. And I think be it Ahmadiyya or be anything else, I mean, instead of rejecting, we need to have this conversation. And killing is definitely nowhere close to conversation.
Forced conversions in
Forced
sin.
conversion.
कि सूफियों के देश में इतनी ज्यादा क्यों ये जुल्म हो रहा है?
Sir, that's what I've been kind of crying for the last 45 minutes now. That, you know, we kind of build expectations. You know, we as educated intellectuals are the first liars, unfortunately. You know, Sindh is a land of Sufism. We don't even begin to kind of engage with the evolution of that society and what has happened with these institutions. Yes, it happens. And power is so central to you know, this whole business of conversion. I've had a personal, you know, meeting with the peer of Bhachandi. Not just that, उसका नाम क्या है?
Abdul Khalik.
Yeah.
Mia
With
Mia
Mittu.
with Mia Mittu, and also with the Sajjada Ritual, right? Of
Abdul Khalik.
yeah, Peer Abdul Khadir. So after I met him, this is the famous Wrinkle Kumari conversion,
Yes, yeah.
right? So I'd gone and I'd gone to meet him and talk about it, and then I went and I requested him that if I could meet Wrinkle Kumari. So he said, "Are you going? Do you have anything else to do?" I said, "I have to go and meet your cousin, the Sajjada Nashri." He said, "All right, go and then I'll arrange a meeting." I'm not going to talk about that. We'll do it later. But then I went to the Sajjada Nashri, and he said, "You know, the British gave us the authority to convert Hindus." Don't say yes or no, but I'm saying that this is what he said. Not even sure the British gave that authority, but they acquired that authority. Don't even stop there. I mean, Asif Ali Zardari and his son go to a peer who are great supporters of, Khatm Nabuwat and blasphemy. So, adherence of the principle of blasphemy. So, the problem is that all these dargahs are extremely problematic, and they're very involved, along with other sects in Hindu conversion, and it's very sad. But I feel, and I'll stop at that. We could, have a conversation. I think the conversion of Hindu girls in Sindh is also a complex issue. It can't be just dealt with a single line. It needs to be understood. I'll tell you.
Correct.
Please.
Let me share with you the Wrinkle Kumari case. So I went to see Wrinkle Kumari. Now,
Wrinkle Kumari is a girl who was a young woman forcibly abducted and then converted to Islam from Hinduism by this man Mia Mittu and his affiliates.
So, we go into the street. I park the driver parks the car. It's a dead end, and the end of that street is a madrasa, right? So it's like you can't run away, kind of a thing. So go to the room, small sitting area. So right in front, so she's sitting with me. Right in front is her mother-in-law, her husband next to the mother-in-law, and on the door you have the brother-in-law sitting. So she's crowded by the family. And by that time, there was so much published in the newspapers about the Wrinkle Kumari case. She'd gone to the court, all of that stuff. It just made no sense to me to ask her, okay, so you've been forcibly converted. It would have been highly stupid of me. So I started chatting with her. I said, what do you do? She said, I teach, chatted. So what do you like? What do you cook? And a good small talk. And I left. So evening, I get a call from Mia Mittu. And he says, you've done such magic. Faryal Beti, I mean, that Wrinkle Kumari's name had been changed to Faryal. Faryal Beti was asking for your numbers. If you don't mind, can I give her your numbers? Of course. So I then chatted with Wrinkle Kumari for a period of 4 to 5 years. Very odd time. I remember she would send me, sometimes she would send me ayahs, verses of Quran or some saying. There was one in which was something like that, you should never hurt your parents. So I remember I wrote back to her, I said, what you did. And she responded, she said, Main kya karti? Right? I explored that one case. And I know the liberals will hate my arguing that. See, the problem is that Sindh is very complex. Because of lack of educational funds, majority of schools are co-ed. And see the issue of a minority in a majoritarian system. You don't have capable boys of your own community. You end up meeting boys of the other community. You fall in love. Now, having said that, I agree that she had never signed on. She liked the guy and she willingly left. She never signed on to conversion. I don't think she was thinking about it. Right? But the problem is that once you leave your household, it's a writing on the wall that you will get converted. And the young Hindu girl in Sindh is caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. On the one hand, she knows that if it's not, I mean, it's forced conversion and then there is forced conversion. So there are cases where, of course you're forced to be converted, you're not signing off to conversion, but you've left your home. If you go back, if your parents manage to retrieve you, what they do is, and this is middle class Hindu families, they will retrieve you, send you to India. And there's not a lot of happiness leaving. Whatever, and I'm not saying that Pakistan is treating these Hindus great and Pakistan is wonderful, and vice versa. Same thing is happening on the other side, but it's home. It's very difficult to leave home. So all I'm trying to say is the conversion issue is far more complex than we make it sound. And I'm not forgiving the state and the state looking the other way. And I don't think that it's institutionalized conversion. It is more of local, institutions,
Power dynamics,
power dynamics, which drive that.
drug crisis. Sorry,
just
we have other questions as well. Drug,
बात में कर लेते हैं.
give them a chance.
80% are the 12 and 13 years old kid, and if, you know,
Sir, I'm not sympathizing.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
it. I'm not
Drug
sympathizing.
crisis,
Okay.
and then we have two more. Hassan Mustafa also has to speak. So up and then
I'm not talking about specific cases. I'm just telling you my experience. And in fact, go and talk to the Hindu lawyer who is the daughter-in-law of that left. Yeah.
Hmm.
Talk to her. She is a Hindu herself, and she'll tell you that the issue is far more complex. So we can pick on and of course, converting 13-year, 14-year-old. I mean, that's more than forced conversion. I mean, it's
child abuse.
child abuse,
Yeah.
right? So nobody is sympathizing with that. But all I'm saying is,
There are complicated reasons. So drug crisis को address कर देना का इंडियन पंजाब में मेरा कोई drugs का क्या ताल्लुक है दरगाहों पे?
okay, drugs are there. Of course, drugs are there, but it's not drug driven. Drugs have been there. People have get intoxicated. In fact, the modern liberal in urban centers thinks that, I mean, for them, the big thing about Sufism is that you could take drugs. I mean, nonsense. That's not what Sufism is, right? But for example, Sindh and Punjab, our drug problem started with the 1980s. So there has been a huge expansion of supply of drug and poverty and prostitution, by the way. I wish somebody did a study, there is a rapid increase of these two things. But the Punjab context is very different, and it continues to happen. This one is kind of much longer, in terms
You
of.
wouldn't say in the last 10 years there's been a tectonic.
No. That's not.
That's happening in Indian Punjab and unfortunately more intensely. And that's a different context altogether than Pakistan, I would say.
But often the pipeline leaks.
Yeah, so I know India blames that Pakistan sends all the drugs through the
We do as well.
land route, and maybe we do with drones
And from
everything.
Afghanistan.
And Afghanistan as
Comes
well,
from.
perhaps. So anyway, let's. You had a question? Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Can
You
you speak?
introduce yourself.
My name is Samir Raij. I'm a recent New Yorker, moved from Pakistan. Could you speak briefly about the nexus of judiciary, like courts, the state, and Sufi dargahs? Because there was recent research which showed that in districts where there was a higher density of Sufi dargahs in Pakistan, the law was distorted a lot more compared to other districts. And the reason for that wasn't necessarily economic. So they compared it to also districts where there were landowners who were non-religiously affiliated. Could you explain why Sufi dargahs tend to extort or utilize law for their favor if it's not based on holding economic power? And also it's not a question of inheritance or lineage, because that's also driven through the Gadi Nashin system. So what really motivates these Sufi dargahs and Sufis themselves to continue to distort the use of law, even though in most cases they tend to side with the current sitting government in terms of how the state is run.
I haven't seen-
One more. So, yes, Hussain.
Thank you. I'll just add to Samir's question. You mentioned in your talk, thanks. You mentioned in your talk that the state had used over time peers for PR propaganda purposes, and you also mentioned that Marids are getting smarter. How do you, just to add on to that, how do you see the direction of play with more information among the devotees as maybe as part of their own spiritual journey versus what the state is asking them to do?
So, very good. And the last one, because we are totally out of time, is Hassan Mustafa. Oh, I'm so sorry. You've had your share. Hassan Mustafa, sir, please go ahead. What you wanted to say, and if there's a question.
Yeah. So with the positive, two things, the positive on sin, I'm still optimistic sin is the cradle of all religions, is the ground central of all religions and melting pot of all faiths. I am from a Sindhu river on whose banks the Vedas were written, So one thing I would like you to put, shed a light that the close links between the Tasawwuf and the Vedanta. And how would you build your imagination had the throne of India would become to Dar Shakoo instead of Aurangzeb? How would you have foreseen the situation in Sub-Continent? Had the marriage of since you mentioned Zardari, so just on a very lighter vein, had the marriage of Ben Nazir would happen.
Would have been history would have been different. Yeah, that's what you're suggesting. Yes.
Hassan, my dear friend Hassan, I wish I had Dara Shikoh, but I also wonder if even if it had been Dara Shikoh, had a system of power driven us towards something different. Let me also remind you to forget about Asif Ali Zardari or his son. The peers of Matiari have been involved in, for example, kidnapping people, for extortion. So, peers have also been involved with the Dapus sin as well. And, very recently, I started kind of doing some research on, for example, in the tribal area in Pakistan, in Punjab, right, in South Punjab. You have, teachers, masters, people who qualified, who had master's degrees, school teachers become dacoits. And one of them, said that, and these guys are linked with, not just the big pupils, but also, who could be or may not be, linked with dargahs as well. And very simple, if you have, these are pure economic issues, and people who have the capacity who then fail, then this is the method they adopt. So my, what I implore and what I'm trying to say is that historically, yes, Indian politics would have been different had Dara Shikoh been there. But really, let's think and engage. I mean, our communal relations may have panned out a bit differently, but socioeconomically, our journey maybe wouldn't have been any different. Maybe the dargahs would still be doing what they're doing right now.
Nexus between judiciary and the dargahs and the state, right?
I haven't seen that particular study, but I've seen another one, which argues that wherever there were dargahs, I mean, this is done by somebody I know, a professor at Oxford University, arguing that wherever there are dargahs, the education, the number of education, the education output was low during the British period and later on. I'll tell you what I drew from that study because it was done in my area. And I have serious problems with that. I mean, when econometricians tend to kind of put their heart and foot in something without conceptualizing other things, then they come up with all the wrong results. Now, the problem with that study done by Adil Malik at Oxford is that he picked up areas precisely where the state has, be it the British colonial state or the post-colonial Pakistani state, he picked up areas where the state has absented itself deliberately. These are hotbeds of sectarianism as well. And without looking at other factors, he deliberately drew the conclusion that's because of the dargah. So I would really seriously want to, I mean, I can't answer you unless I see, because I had a chat with Adil Malik. I said, why don't you, as a comparison, you've done the study, why don't you use the same econometrics model and collect data and do studies, for example, in Lahore, around Data Sahab, Multan, big, centers of dargah, and see if you get the same results. Or maybe you may be able to see that the results are different, so there could be some other factor driving it. So I would want to see that study on law and then be able to see what are the areas, what is he saying. One very quick thing. I am personally doing a study, I have to finish it, and this was looking at economic centers around dargahs. So I did 4 shrines, I covered 4 shrines in South Punjab, major shrines. And I want to kind of expand my my sample size in Punjab, at least. What I found out was very interesting. I mean, the shops around the economic centers, I mean, big bazaars around the dargahs, where the family was weaker, there were almost 50% of the shopkeepers were either Ahle Hadith or Deobandi. They were no longer even Bareli. The stronger a dargah, you would have Barelvis 50 or 60%, but not necessarily all linked to that particular dargah. So here is a center of, a power center around the shrine, which is changing. So that is something which needs to be evaluated. So, just for your information.
Yeah.
And
So I just want to add a quick point. I think what you're referring to often happens because traditionally a lot of dargahs have land, lots of land, and land as it increases in value, both urban, rural, commercial. So a lot of disputes in the recent decades have been around land, and in particular the different branches of the descendants fighting among each other over the control of the shrine, because shrine is also both a source of spiritual power and lots of money, cash, hard cash, unaccounted for. So there are so many disputes. Almost every so there was Pir Nasiruddin of Golda Sharif. It's an outside Islamabad. He wrote a book.
Next to GHQ.
Close to GSQ, new GSQ.
D12.
Yeah, so he authored a book called Hasbun Nas, in which he documented and if you were to believe him, every second shrine is a dispute in the court because the descendants have gone against each other. Who's the rightful owner? And same is the case in India.
but one other change which happened in Pakistan was that when Awqaf took over shrines, a lot of land was also taken.
Taken over.
And I don't know what happened with Ziaul Haq and denationalizing,
Mm.
but so lands are contested, but the state has also taken over.
Has taken over.
uh,
Absolutely.
lot of
Shrines.
land.
But you see, that is very strange because
This guy, Khadim Rizvi,
during
was from
the British times, they had tremendous amounts of land and they were given, lots of them were justices of peace, so to
Yes,
speak, the
yes.
magistrates and so on. In fact, the governor of, one of the Diwans from Pakistan was appointed the governor of Punjab. But it's no longer so. So their power really doesn't emanate from these large landholdings at all. And in fact, to what you were saying, they don't have that popular power anymore. But it's only because of state support that they remain in power and they can exercise the,
Yeah, but,
they've lost their power.
But Bari Imam, if Sajada Rasheen was changed, the last one was changed
Yeah.
by Ziaul Haq.
Yeah.
To a very important question of what's the spiritual journey? Where does the believer or the murid stand? There is no study per se. So we're looking at a population of 250 million people. So every 10 people less, you may have 20 people more. But not necessarily a lot of clarity as to what what they get going for. I mean, it's part of the culture. Ab jate hain na, go to the dargah, to pray. Uh, and therefore, but what I'm saying is that this murid has also become more conscious and in a way modern in his or her thinking. Their expectation is no longer simply that you give me an amulet and you pray for it. There is a material expectation as well, which is understandably linked with power of the pir. I mean, they're more conscious of the material power of the pir than they were before and what they could extract. So the relationship is built with the dargah. They're khalifas who try to be close to you bring gifts. And the whole process of gifts and rewarding the pir is basically to be able to put yourself in a position to extract something, right? So here is the issue that between his material needs and unfulfilled spiritual needs, and on top, to the icing on the top, a lot of overall confusion about religion and what you should and you should not, or what you cannot believe, makes that person very directionless. If they can afford to, I mean, I feel that the reason extremism didn't spread like wildfire in these areas is because the mullah has not really struggled to get more people. They're not interested. I mean, I had engagement with, for my book, I had chatted with and interviewed some leadership of Jaish-e-Mohammed. And at one point, this is like 5-6 years ago, I asked them, I said, there's so much drugs, so many drugs in Bahawalpur area, and there's prostitution as well. So why don't you proselytize and bring it part of your, talking to the people? We're like, no. We don't want to get distracted from our main purpose of jihad. So we ain't getting towards this thing. We don't want to get involved. They don't get involved. And therefore, very selectively, people who are, and interestingly, the whole Taliban model is a very different model. I draw a distinction between the Taliban model and the Punjab model Punjab Sindh model of recruitment, which is very simple. You do not necessarily, the madrasas is there as your support base, but you recruit not necessarily from the madrasa. You recruit even from the government schools, because you want a jihadi to be a little more educated to understand the bomb menus and the rest of the nonsense. So there has been a mix there. So people have not, some have gone, some have not gone, but overall, people remain in that limbo.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aisha, for a great conversation, and thank you for great questions and comments as well, because I wish we had more time, but we are totally out of time. And thanks, Dr. Mehdi and Tyra Naqvi Saiba for organizing this.
Yeah, thank you.
We're really grateful once again. और भाई भाई कोई इनके भी कुछ वो बाबा साहब से कहीं नजरे करम करे, कुछ बिल्कुल ही दिल जो है ना इनका
ये seriously at heart है,
अच्छा, ठीक है।
काम हो चुका है।
ओके इसलिए को आपको भी दम करके ना पानी वानी उसके बाद एक चीजें
Stop. Go back,